I want to welcome Millicenta from Ghana. She is going to take us through another session, and we are going to understand her world of medical genetics. So, Millicent, you are welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We are looking forward to your presentation also and to learn so much. Thank you so much. Welcome, Millicent.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Caroline. And I'm really happy to be here. And thank you, Lucy, for your nice talk on robotics and your journey. I really enjoyed listening to it. So I will share my slides and you can just give me a thumbs up if you can see.
Yeah, we can see it well.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, so hi everyone, and happy International Day of Women and Girls in STEM to all of you and to all the people on here who are doing work in making sure that more women and girls can be in STEM and thrive in STEM. So today I'm going to be briefly speaking on a few things. So I'll start with introducing myself. Then I will talk about my journey. I am a geneticist, so how did I get there? Then I will talk more about what is genetics in the first place, and we'll go through some genetics case studies. We'll look at benefits of having a genetics career, and signs that a career in genetics may be good for you, and what courses to pursue if you want to pursue, a career in genetics. What skills do you need for those careers, and how do you build those skills? So, as I mentioned earlier, my name is Millicenta, but you can call me Millie. That's absolutely fine. I was born and raised in Ghana, and that's where I had the bulk of my education. So I had my primary and secondary and university education in Ghana. Then I moved to the UK to do my master's in clinical embryology, but we'll talk about that more in the next slide. And I currently work as a geneticist. And basically what I do is to study traits in humans. So I'm a human geneticist. So I study traits in humans and look at how these traits are passed on from generation to generation and how they influence disease. Again, I'll talk more about it in my next slide as we go on. Currently, I am a PhD candidate in medical genetics at the University of Cambridge in the UK, and I am funded by the Gates Cambridge Trust as well. Also, I am the founder and lead for Reach for STEM, which is an organization that pushes initiatives to make sure that more Black and minority people can be in STEM. Okay, so this is a slide that summarizes my journey and how I got to be a geneticist. So it all started from high school, like Lucy. I noticed that I was very interested in science and in biology. So in high school, I was doing biology, physics, and chemistry. And I noticed that I really loved doing biology, and I loved looking at anything that had to do with genetics in my biology class. However, at that level, I didn't really know what you could do with biology. All I knew was if you loved biology, you can become a doctor. I didn't know of anything else. And so I thought, okay, maybe I should just become a doctor because I loved biology. But as I progressed, then I went on. I studied, passed my exams, and applied to medical school and had really good grades. And I made the grades to get into medical school. but it didn't work out. And I think that's the first lesson I want to share, that in life, sometimes things do not work out. You may do everything right, but it may not work out how you wanted it or how you thought it would. And that is absolutely fine. Because for me, that's initial rejection I had was what really redirected me into what I wanted to do. So my idea of being in medicine was not really because, I deep down inside wanted to do medicine, was because I didn't know of other alternatives I could pursue with my interest in biology and in genetics. And so when I didn't get into medical school, it was very depressing for me. I went to a long phase of depression, and I just somehow one day came out of it and decided I will still go, to school and study biochemistry, which I was offered. And so I did that. And that brings me to my second point, which is, what do you have in your hands? It's very important to realize that, sometimes maybe you want to get somewhere, you want to be, a geneticist, but right now you're a student in high school. And so you have to give what you have now your best. And that's what I did. So I gave biochemistry my best, regardless of anything. And through that process, I identified my core interest, which was in genetics. And so as I studied biochemistry, I realized that, okay, I could, pursue a career in genetics. And there was something called genetics, but although it wasn't being done in Ghana, in other parts of the world, people had careers and they were medical geneticists. However, unfortunately for me, the people around me did not really, know what I could do with a career, with a course like genetics or biochemistry. And so I had to strengthen myself, believe in myself. I had a really supportive family, and it really helped to go onto the internet and read about the possibilities of what I could do with a career or a course like biochemistry or genetics. And it was through that I found my master's in clinical embryology. So growing up, I knew that I wanted to do something that had to do with, diseases, the developmental phase of human biology. And basically, I was intrigued by, why is it that people are born with diseases, but some cannot, we don't have cures for some of them. And for some, being born with a certain disease, which is not your fault, is like a life sentence. And so that's what led me to the University of Oxford, where I did my master's in clinical embryology. And after that, I worked in various genetics fields. And maybe you can ask me more questions about that if you are interested. I worked in reproductive genetics, cancer genetics, and, linked to what Lucy was saying earlier, now you need to understand coding or computing in all fields, even in genetics and biology. And so I saw the need to upskill, and I went to further my education again and took a course in clinical bioinformatics at the University of Manchester, before being here where I'm doing my PhD in medical genetics. And so for me, I would like to really emphasize this over here. Let me use my pointer right here. I would like to emphasize this, that maybe you may have a perception of how your journey should go, like this, in a straight line. But in reality, it might not happen that way. You would still progress, you will still move forward, but it may consist of a series of ups and downs, and that is absolutely fine. And the most important thing is to keep trying again, is to not give up, is to keep sight of your goal and where you want to be and move towards there. And so I've put a few pictures of my happy moments, when I graduated from Oxford and all of that. However, I want to emphasize that the journey was not like this. It was ups and downs, ups and downs. But regardless, we still made progress. And that is what life looks like sometimes. Okay, so now to the technical part. What is genetics? So when I say genetics, I'm referring to the study of how genes and traits are passed down from one generation to the other. So for example, you might notice a particular trait in your family. Maybe you have a certain hair type. So for me, I'm Ghanaian, yet I have really curly hair, and my family, this seems to run through my family. So that may be a trait I would want to study. And these can be a wide variety of traits and even come down to diseases. So there are diseases that are passed down through our genes as well. And one of the very common ones we know of is sickle cell disease. And there are a few related terms. So when we talk about genetics, another term that goes along with genetics is genomics, which is the study of an organism's genome. So that is the entire makeup, DNA makeup. You are not just looking at one gene or one part of the DNA. You are looking at the DNA in its entirety because, usually in diseases, not all diseases can be linked to one gene. Normally, you have influences from other genes as well. And so the study of that entire DNA makeup is what we refer to as genomics. And now also there is a very nice computational side of genomics that is a scientific discipline called bioinformatics. And so with bioinformatics, we are looking at the application of computer technology to collect, store, analyze genetic data and genetic information. And so when we pull out people's DNA, when we extract people's DNA and we pull out the sequences, we want to understand, what are the differences in the sequences. We want to be able to annotate them. And we use tools in a process or in a discipline called bioinformatics. Now, genetics is a really interesting career path because there are so many options available to you. It can be applied in different fields, in healthcare, in agriculture, in forensics. When I say forensics, I mean if you are interested in crime investigation, if you are looking for how can you identify someone who committed a crime, you can use genetics to be able to do that. Genetics can also be applied in biotechnology and in pharmaceutical sciences, in the pharmaceutical industry, in communications as well. There are people who are scientific writers and journalists in corporate, spaces as well. You can study genetics and also be in consulting or decide to be in the regulatory side of genetics. And there are people who also study genetics and end up in law. So it's a huge part of genetics. There are lots of conversations around bioethics. If you've heard of something called gene editing, it's one of the huge conversations in genetics. And we have people who, specialize in law in addition to genetics to be able to help with that, okay? And most of these fields offer options in academia, which is if you want to teach or do research, or in industry. Okay. So now I'm going to go through a few case studies of how we can apply genetics. So the first case study we would look at a couple, Mr. A and Mrs. A. So Mr. A is age 30, his wife is age 28, and they have a 2-year-old son who bleeds spontaneously. So they have a child who has been bleeding from time to time they don't really know what happens. They just see the son is bleeding. And so, they go to the hospital a number of times, but they're not really able to find out why, till one day they see a genetic counselor or a medical geneticist. And this medical geneticist requests for a genetic test to be done. And through looking at the DNA of the child, they're able to identify that the child is bleeding because of a genetic disorder called hemophilia or hemophilia A. And because of this, looking through the genes and finding this genetic disorder, they now understand what happened to the child, and they are able to better manage the child and plan for the next child. So this is one way we can apply genetics in understanding diseases and in making diagnosis. Then we can also apply genetics in, manufacturing or in agriculture. So in our second case study, we are going to take Farmer T, who is a producer of cotton for a major clothing manufacturer. However, recently, Farmer T has noticed that, the quality of his cotton has reduced due to pest attacks. So because of that, his manufacturers have been complaining, the people who buy his cotton have been complaining, and this has been a major disturbing point for Farmer T. So Farmer T consults with a plant genetic engineer. So if you remember, I mentioned if you do genetics, you can work in agriculture, okay, and become a plant genetic engineer. And this genetic engineer helps him by creating a genetically modified form of his cotton so that when the pests attack, they're able to resist this pest attack. And so because of that, the quality of the cotton is brought back to normal, okay? And here I would mention that the technique employed by the plant genetic engineer is called genetic modification, which you may have heard. Okay, then another way we can apply genetics, or if you want to enter genetics and you don't know where to be, you can also again help in fighting climate change. So in this third case study, we look at the Ministry of Environmental Protection, and they've noticed that the amount of plastic being disposed of is increasing. And even worse, this plastic does not degrade easily, causing environmental problems. And so one student called Miss Y notices this problem. In her project, she applies genetic principles to a microbe, so a microorganism. And what this does is to produce large quantities of an enzyme, so of a chemical that can eat away the plastic. So instead of the plastic piling up and choking the gutters and causing floods, now we can use this microbe to eat or decompose the plastic. And so we don't have environmental problems as we usually had. Cool, right? And so now we are going to look at what are the benefits of having a genetic career. So the benefits are vast, I must say. I have really enjoyed being in this career path, and there are a variety of reasons. First of all, I think the most important thing for being in genetics is that you can tackle a wide range of global challenges. Have you heard of cancer, COVID-19? There are all these global issues where genetics is being applied to solve. Also, because it is a fast-growing field, there are new career options cropping up every day. And so the salaries are very competitive. There are also multiple and flexible job opportunities. For example, if you work in bioinformatics, you can work from home and you can switch. So if you are in healthcare, you can apply some of the principles to agriculture and vice versa. And so there's that flexibility. It also offers you the chance to work with exciting technologies and inventions. And I'm going to go back to this picture where this is me, and this is a typical lab. So this is one of the labs I work in. And, there are a few machines here. We call them sequences. So this one is one, and this one is another. And what that helps you do is to read out the full genetic code or DNA code. And so there are all these exciting technologies and inventions that you can work with and be a part of. Also, working in genetics offers you great career progression opportunities because, as I mentioned earlier, it's a really fast-growing field. I think this is the best time to be in genetics in anywhere in the world because the field is growing so quickly. And so there are lots of opportunities to progress in your career within a very short time. And there's also a high sense of fulfillment. So recently, the FDA in the US and also the UK regulatory agency, and even in the EU, they have approved a new treatment for sickle cell called Casgevy, and this employs gene therapy technology. Okay, and so imagine being part of a team that's helped in developing Casgevy, which can help or promises to help many people treat sickle cell. So that is very fulfilling to be in. Also, this is another example of where genetic engineering is being applied to mosquito control. So malaria is one of the biggest problems disturbing us in Africa. And, with gene technologies, with genetic engineering, you can edit mosquitoes and reduce their reproduction, and so they don't spread as much, and you can reduce malaria incidence. So as we can see, genetics has a huge application and is a very beneficial career. Okay, so signs that a career in genetics may be for you. How are you able to tell? So first of all, if you enjoy studying particular subjects such as biology, chemistry, ICT, mathematics, then you can consider genetics as a career option. Also, you can look at what topics interest you. So maybe for me, for example, I didn't like studying some parts of biology, but I knew that anything that had to do with genes, inheritance, DNA, I enjoyed it. So that particular topic also led me to genetics. Are there any skills that you have enjoyed learning? So when you go to the laboratory, do you like working there? Let me also mention that now genetics is broader than working in the laboratory. And so maybe you are interested in genetics, but you want to be working on the computer instead. There are also career options available for you. And also, is there any change you want to see happening in the world? So I've spoken to many young people who tell me, I want to see cancer go away. Cancer is causing too many issues. If you are one of these, then you might want to consider a career in genetics. So what courses do you pursue for a career in genetics? So at the high school level, you'd have to do science. And when you go to the university, any biology or biomedical science related course should be fine. So far as you are doing modules in genetics or population genetics, that should be fine. And many people, after doing any of these courses, will progress to work in a genetic specialized area. Others would also pursue further study, like myself, in a genetics related course. There are people who also study computer science and transition to genetics through bioinformatics. That is also a possibility. Basically, there are many paths to it, so there's not one way to it. So I'm about closing, but before that, I would like to highlight skills that are needed for a genetics career. So first of all, critical thinking. As in all other STEM fields, you need to think critically because you are solving, very novel problems many a time in genetics. Also, communication skills are key because when you come up with, a project and you solve a problem, you need to be able to communicate your findings. And so, for example, presentation or writing skills are very important. You also need creativity because you are most of the time solving problems that have not been solved before. You would also be working in a team almost always in genetics. So you have to know how to work with other people. It is also important to be curious because most of the time you'll be solving new problems. So you want to always be asking questions to find out why, because that is what will lead you to some of these novel innovations we are talking about. And I already mentioned problem solving. Like in all other STEM fields, you need problem solving because STEM is about solving problems. So how do you build these skills? There are a variety of ways, and I've just mentioned a few. You have to, take more interest in making observations, observe things around you, because many a time you'll be studying things, looking at things, and you would find differences in some of your samples and all of that. And all of that takes observational skills. Also learn to ask questions. Right now, as you are in school, it's important to be asking questions because these are some of the skills you would need in a genetics career. You also have to know how to build computational thinking, think about things in the process. When you're planning an experiment, it's going to happen in the process. Also, this is very important for me, using technology efficiently. It is important to know how to use the internet. I mentioned earlier that in where I was born, I did not see anyone really doing genetics, but I found it from the internet. So the internet is a great resource to learn so many things. So take advantage of it. And also through your extracurricular activities like this one, it's really important to join these and things like science clubs as well. Okay, so that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.